I grew up with a very supportive family. I grew up with my mom, my brother, my older brother, and my grandparents. The few of us, we were a very close, tight-knit family. But my dad, he was out of the picture at a very young age for myself. God was always very important. We prayed, we read our Bibles, we went to church every single Sunday. In high school, I started to really try to find my identity. I tried to explore just hanging out with different people, different friends from work and from school. Around my junior year is really when I started to notice that there was a change that was actually happening in my life. I was drinking with friends, and I was smoking pot just to try to experience something different. It was very short after high school that I moved out of my mom's house. I moved in with some friends. That way I can have a little bit more liberty, a little bit more freedom to kind of live the way that I was wanting to live. I was really starting to submerge myself into a different culture, that culture being that party scene. I was still going to church at that point, and I was putting on a pretty good mask. Nobody at church would have ever guessed. I really enjoyed the way that living for the world made me feel. I really didn't want anything to do with God because I knew that God would not be happy with the decisions that I was making, and I didn't want to risk feeling that way. I stopped coming to church as often. Nobody still knew what I was doing or where I was. I remember thinking, I really don't remember exactly what a relationship or an encounter with God actually feels like. It was a desire and an emotion that I really missed and that was lacking in my life. Really, my spirit was black. It was hollow. There was nothing left inside of it, and I felt the furthest away from God that I've ever felt. Lifelink Church was hosting a camp, a youth camp, and my way was actually paid for. I decided that I wanted to give God really one last opportunity, and I told God at that point, God, if you don't speak at this camp, then I'm going to be turning my back on you forever.
I came to Lifelink Church in 2010 after having left a church that I was a part of for 12 years. I had to leave because there was some leadership there that had taken advantage of their authority over my life. It really broke me and it shook me, and I had to get out, I had to leave, and I began searching for something. I wasn't quite sure what. I knew that something better, something more fulfilling was out there.
Every day I would tell God, are you going to talk today? Are you going to speak to me today? When are you going to speak to me? It was actually finally on the final day, the final night of this camp where we were having a personal prayer time. I tucked myself away in the corner of the sanctuary, and I just tried to make a connection with God. It was in that time that my brother actually sought me out. When my brother grabbed me by the arm and he picked me up and embraced me in his arms, he began to pray for me, and he began to speak things over me, tell me how much God loved me, that the lifestyle that I was living is not how God wanted me to live. I don't have to be stuck in the way of the lifestyle that I'm choosing, and that there's a way out of that lifestyle. I remember specifically and so vividly, told me that he had a vision from God, holding hands with my wife, my future wife, and he saw me holding hands with my future daughter as well. And that's not something that I ever wanted for myself in that season of life. That's not anything that I ever expected for my life either. But to hear those words and to hear exactly what God had for me, to hear that my lifestyle can change, that was exactly what I needed and what I was looking for from God.
I remember that summer trying to cope with the pain and the brokenness and the emptiness that I was experiencing. I would go alone and get blackout wasted. I would go to different college parties, meet different people, get drunk there, have to call people to come pick me up. It was actually my dad who had confronted me, telling me that if I didn't get my act together, stop coming home drunk, and stop living the way that I was choosing to live, that I would have to find a new place to live. And hearing that from my dad, it was just such a wake-up call. I really knew the whole time, but hearing that, I just knew right then that I was just called for more. It wasn't long after that where I got invited to a 4th of July party from a friend from Lifelink. It was there that I met a couple pastors from church. I was able to open up about my story and about my experience and my situation that I was going through. They were able to just speak life into me in a way that I had never experienced before. And just by that conversation, I knew I had just had to try their church.
It was that very night that I decided to turn my life around again, and I recommitted my life to Christ. There was no turning back, and that I'd be living for Him moving forward. I decided that it would be best if I quit my job and distanced myself away from a lot of the people that I was associated with at that time. And I replaced it with going back to church. I filled my life with LifeLink Church again, and I really started to hang out and immerse myself in the culture of LifeLink, and it became home to me again. I also met my wife. I could say meet, but she was there in front of me the entire time. I just started to notice her more, and shortly after that we fell in love.
So I decided to come to a Saturday night service at CTA, and the moment I drove into LifeLink Church and experienced the worship, I just knew that this was my home, this was my church family, and I immediately plugged myself in. I actually helped tear down that night after the service.
Looking back on the last 6 years of my life, I'm truly amazed at where God has brought me, bringing me from a place of desolation and loneliness and darkness to a place where I'm loved, and I'm married to my best friend, Danielle, and we have 2 beautiful daughters. We both have rededicated and recommitted ourselves through baptism at LifeLink, and we're both actively serving on the Dream Team in worship as well. We both are very passionate about worship and where God has us. I'm a band director today and acoustic guitar player for the worship team, and I couldn't be happier with the identity that I've found in God.
It was that same night that I decided to give my yes to God, and ever since then, my life has never been the same. There is no mistake too big or path too dark to keep you from the love of Jesus.
I'm so glad that I can sit here and proudly say that I've given my yes to God.